There are moments in life when you can see exactly where you want to go, but your feet refuse to move. You tell yourself you're not ready, that the timing is wrong, that you need just a little more preparation, a little more certainty, a little more courage before you begin. But what if the waiting itself is the thing holding you back? This is a story about a man who spent years standing at the edge of his own life, watching, planning, hesitating, while the world moved on without him. It is a story about faith, about the quiet terror of beginning, and about what happens when one ordinary person finally decides that an imperfect step forward is worth more than a perfect plan that never moves. In a small riverside town, there lived a man named Elias. Elias had a gift that most people spend their whole lives searching for. He could look at an empty piece of land and see something beautiful there. He could close his eyes, listen to the way a family described their dreams, and translate those dreams into lines, angles, light, and space. He was, by every measure, a man who understood how to build things. But Elias had never built anything of his own. He was 38 years old and lived in a quiet apartment on the third floor of a building that overlooked the river. Every morning, he woke before the sun, made his coffee the same way, and sat at the same window. He would watch the water move and think about the studio he would open someday. The studio with tall glass walls and wooden floors and morning light that came in at just the right angle. He had sketched it hundreds of times. He knew exactly what it would feel like to walk through its door. He just wasn't ready yet. There was always a reason. The economy wasn't stable enough. He didn't have enough saved. His portfolio needed 2 or 3 more strong pieces. The city wasn't the right moment. He needed to learn a little more, wait a little longer, prepare a little better, and so he prepared. Year after year, he prepared. His apartment was full of sketchbooks stacked along the walls like quiet monuments to intention. Ideas he had shaped in the dark, plans he had refined through sleepless nights, visions so detailed and fully formed that they felt almost real. Almost. But a dream locked inside a sketchbook is not a dream in motion. It is just a drawing. Elias did not see it that way. He believed that patience was wisdom, that caution was intelligence, that the man who waited for the right moment was wiser than the man who rushed in unprepared. He believed, with complete sincerity, that his moment was simply still coming. And for a long time, it seemed like Elias was right. His career moved the way a well-drafted plan is supposed to move, steadily, precisely, without unnecessary risk. He joined one of the most respected architectural firms in the city at 26, and within 3 years, he had become the kind of name that senior partners mentioned in quiet, approving tones. He had an eye for detail that others simply did not possess. He could find the flaw in a structural drawing that 3 other architects had already signed off on. He could take a client's vague, scattered vision and return it to them as something coherent, beautiful, and real. He was, without question, talented. The promotions came. The compliments came. Clients asked for him by name. A regional design journal featured one of his commercial projects in a year-end showcase. His colleagues respected him. His managers trusted him. And every year, at his annual review, someone across the table would say some version of the same thing. "Elias, you have an exceptional future ahead of you." He would smile, thank them, and on the drive home he would think, "Yes, and one day I will build something that is entirely mine one day, when the time was right." What Elias did not notice, what he could not yet see, was that success had become his most comfortable excuse. Every achievement at the firm quietly whispered to him that he was on the right path, that the waiting was working, that a man this recognized, this valued, this professionally secure, was clearly doing something right. And so the sketchbooks at home grew taller. The ideas inside them grew more elaborate. His personal vision became grander and more refined. With every passing season, more detailed, more perfect, more impossible to begin without the exact right conditions. He was building the blueprint of a life he had not yet had the courage to live, and he called it patience. It began with a name he almost didn't recognize. A junior colleague had joined the firm 4 years earlier, a quiet, eager young man named Daniel, whom Elias had informally mentored through his first difficult projects. Elias had shown him how to read a client's silence, how to balance aesthetics with structure, how to defend a design with calm confidence in a room full of skeptics. Daniel had been grateful, attentive, and deeply inspired. And then one morning, Elias saw Daniel's name in an architecture newsletter, not as an employee, as a founder. Daniel had left the firm 8 months earlier, quietly, without announcement, and had opened a small independent studio on the east side of the city. The newsletter described his first completed project, a community library. Modest in scale, but alive with warmth and intention. The photographs showed light falling through carefully placed windows onto reading chairs where actual people sat, actually reading. Elias stared at those photographs for a long time. He felt something he could not immediately name. It was not quite jealousy. It was something quieter and more unsettling than that. It was the particular pain of watching someone else live the life you had been saving for yourself. He closed the newsletter and told himself that Daniel had simply been impatient, that he had moved too soon, that the real test would come later, when the business faced its first real pressure. Then, 6 weeks after that morning, the firm called a company-wide meeting. Restructuring, they said. Market shifts. Difficult but necessary decisions. Elias's department was dissolved. His role, the role he had spent 12 years building, the role he had hidden behind while waiting for his perfect moment, was gone. Just like that. On a gray Tuesday afternoon, in a conference room with bad lighting and lukewarm coffee, the platform he had been standing on quietly disappeared beneath him. He drove home in complete silence. He sat at his window and watched the river, and for the first time in 12 years, he had nothing left to wait behind. For he did not fall apart dramatically. That was not Elias's way. He simply went quiet. He stopped setting his morning alarm. He stopped making his coffee at the same time. The rituals that had structured his days, the early light, the river view, the careful preparation, slowly dissolved into long, shapeless hours that blurred one into the next without meaning or direction. His phone rang. Friends called. Former colleagues sent messages about new openings, freelance opportunities, firms that were hiring. His sister left 3 voicemails in 1 week, her voice moving from curious to concerned to quietly alarmed. He read every message. He answered none of them. Instead, he turned inward, and he turned backward. He began pulling the sketchbooks from the walls, not to work from them, but to revisit them, to hold them. He would sit cross-legged on the floor of his apartment surrounded by years of drawings, running his fingers across old pencil lines the way a person touches a scar they cannot stop thinking about. He told himself he was reviewing, reassessing, taking stock. But what he was really doing was grieving, not just the job, but the story he had been telling himself for 12 years. The story in which waiting was wisdom, in which preparation was the same thing as progress, in which the perfect moment was always just slightly ahead, always nearly arrived, always almost here. That story was harder to let go of than the career itself, because if the waiting had been wrong, if all those careful, patient, well-reasoned years of not beginning had simply been fear wearing the costume of wisdom, then what did that mean about the life he had lived? He was not ready to answer that question, so he answered it the only way he knew how. He made a new plan. A better plan. A more detailed, more refined, more perfectly constructed plan for the studio he would build someday, when the dust settled, when he felt stronger. When the moment was right, he surrounded himself with his drawings, and he waited. Again. Cheap 5. It was a Thursday morning when Elias finally left the apartment, not with purpose, not with a plan. He simply could not bear the silence of those 4 walls for 1 more hour. He pulled on his coat, walked down the 3 flights of stairs, and found himself on the riverbank without quite remembering the decision to go there. The air was cold and carried the particular stillness of early autumn, that quiet moment, when the world seems to be holding its breath between seasons. The river moved slowly, catching the pale morning light in long, broken reflections. Elias sat on a worn wooden bench near the old ferry dock and stared at the water the way a man stares at a fire, not thinking, just watching. That was when he noticed the boatman. He was old, 70, perhaps more, with the kind of weathered face that speaks of decades spent outdoors in honest work. He was preparing a small, flat-bottomed ferry for its morning crossing, moving with the unhurried ease of a man who had performed this same task 10,000 times and had long since stopped fighting it. Elias watched him in silence for a while. Then, without quite knowing why, he spoke. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. The old man looked up without surprise, as though he had been expecting the question. 43 years, he said simply. "Did you always know this was what you wanted to do?" The boatman paused. He looked out at the river the way people look at something they deeply understand. "No," he said. "But the river didn't ask me if I was ready. It just moved, so I moved with it." He pushed the ferry gently away from the dock. "The water never waited for calm water," he added quietly, almost to himself. "It just moved." Elias sat very still long after the ferry had crossed to the other side. Something inside him, some old stubborn wall, had begun, very quietly, to crack. He did not go home and immediately change his life. That is not how real transformation works. It does not arrive like a thunderclap or a sudden rush of certainty. It arrives the way dawn arrives, so gradually that you cannot point to the exact moment darkness became light. You only notice at some point that you can see again. Elias walked home slowly that morning, the old boatman's words moving through him like water finding its level. The river never waited for calm water. It just moved. He sat at his desk, not the window this time, but the actual desk he had owned for 11 years and rarely used for anything other than stacking unopened mail. He opened his laptop. He opened a blank document, and he wrote 3 words at the top of the page: Elias Van, architect. Not a business plan, not a 5-year projection, not a perfectly researched proposal with market analysis and financial forecasting. Just his name, his title, the simplest possible declaration that he existed and he had something to offer the world. He stared at those 3 words for a long time. Then he kept going. He spent the next 2 hours writing a single page, a quiet, honest description of what he believed good design should feel like, not what he could offer clients. Not a sales pitch, just what he believed, what he had always believed, through all the years of waiting. That evening, he registered a business name online. The process took 11 minutes. He had imagined it would feel monumental. It felt ordinary, small, quietly real. The following morning, he wrote one email to a former client he had genuinely admired, a woman who had once mentioned wanting to renovate a community space but had never found the right person to trust. With it, he did not wait to feel ready before he pressed send. He pressed send, and then he exhaled, slowly, fully, for what felt like the first time in years. The first line had been drawn, and it was imperfect, and it was honest, and it was, finally, unmistakably, alive. A year is a quiet but powerful thing. It does not announce its changes. It simply accumulates them, one small decision at a time, one honest morning after another, one imperfect step laid carefully in front of the last, until one day you look back and can barely recognize the ground you started from. Elias's studio was not what he had drawn in his sketchbooks. It was smaller. The floors were not the wide, pale wood he had imagined. The windows did not catch the light at quite the angle he had always pictured. The office was a single rented room on the second floor of a modest building 3 streets from the river, with a second-hand drafting table and 2 mismatched chairs for client meetings and a small plant on the windowsill that he remembered too. Water, most of the time. It was imperfect in almost every way he had once feared imperfection, and it was entirely, completely, irrevocably his. The woman he had emailed that first evening had replied within 2 days. The community space project had become his first commission, modest in budget, rich in meaning. He had worked on it with a focus and a care he had not felt in years, because for the first time, the work carried his name in a way that mattered. not on a firm's letterhead, on his own. Word moved quietly, the way it does in small professional circles built on trust. A second client came, then a third. He was not the most successful architect in the city. He was not featured in journals or celebrated at industry events. He worked long hours for modest fees and made decisions every day without the safety net of a larger institution behind him. But every morning, he woke before the sun. He made his coffee the same way. And he sat, not at the window this time, but at his own desk, in his own space, doing his own work. And he felt something settle inside him that no promotion or praise had ever quite reached. He felt like a river that had finally stopped waiting for calm water. He felt, for the first time in a very long time, like himself, Chade Elias's story did not end with greatness. It ended with something rarer than that. It ended with peace. And perhaps that is the truest lesson this story carries. That the life you have been waiting to begin will not announce itself, with perfect conditions or ideal timing or a sudden absence of fear. It will simply sit there quietly, on the other side of one honest, imperfect, courageous first step. So if you have been waiting, truly waiting, then these words are for you. Do not confuse preparation with progress. Planning has a purpose, but a plan that never moves is just a dream with better handwriting. At some point, the doing must begin. The perfect moment is not coming. It was never coming. The moment you are standing in right now, uncertain, imperfect, and a little afraid, that is the moment. That has always been the moment. Fear does not disappear before you begin. It disappears because you began. Courage is not the absence of hesitation. It is the decision to move while the hesitation is still there. What you delay, life may decide for you. Elias did not choose to lose his job, but he chose what to do with the empty space it left behind. You may not control what closes, but you always control what you open next. Small beginnings are still beginnings. 3 words on a blank page, 1 email sent without certainty, a business name registered in 11 quiet minutes. This is how real things are built, not in grand gestures, but in small, faithful acts repeated with honesty. The river does not wait for calm water, and neither should you. If this story moved something in you, if somewhere in Elias's journey you recognized a little of your own, then carry this with you today. You are not too late. You are not unprepared. You are simply someone who has not yet taken the first step, and the first step is all the river has ever asked of you.